Well, now we've reached the final new heist of Payday 3. It's been quite a journey to get here, but regardless, the job of these videos isn't done until I've gone over the final heist from year 2. So, without further ado, let's go on a little shopping spree. This heist takes place in the rundown and closed Nobleman Galleria Mall, run by the only member of the Palatucci family stupid enough to continue beefing with the Payday gang, Pietro Palatucci, whom you can even kidnap if you bring the favor for it. Just like with delivery charge previously, the favors for this heist are purchasable in the vendor, so I'll be going over them while I summarize the heist itself. Before I do that though, I just want to ask who turned up the contrast for this heist? I thought this when I first played it back in release, and I still think so now, but this is probably the most aggressively colorful heist in the game, and the best example I can give is the security cameras. This is what a security camera looks like in a normal heist, and this is what a security camera looks like in Shopping Spree. But anyway, back on topic. Starting the heist off, your first goal is to get to Pietro's office and figure out where he's selling supplies from, which, when you think about it, is pretty dumb considering you're there to steal everything anyway, which you can even do with the fire sale favor, completely skipping the part where you need to enter his office. You can just steal whatever you have access to. Speaking of what you have access to, there's 3 main storefronts in the mall itself that can be your objective, and I'll be going over them one by one. Firstly, there's the Corvo Gun Store, where your goal in stealth is to bypass the metal detectors, either by masking up and climbing into the vents, completely destroying the air conditioning in the process, or you can simply disable the metal detectors remotely with either a PC or colored switches. Once you're inside, your goal is to get a QR code from the staff worker inside and use it to go into the staff area, finding the code for this gun safe with a bunch of rifles you can bag and steal. There's also a spare Red Fox rifle and minigun for you to use, without overskills of course. And lastly, the most fun and unique part of the gun store is the musket that you can actually pick up and use as a weapon. Well, you can use it as long as you want with melee, but as soon as you pull the trigger and fire the singular piece of ammunition, it's gone. I'm not questioning why Pietro leaves his weapons loaded, he's probably never watched Terminator. In Loud, the goal is still the gun safe, obviously, but to get inside, you're randomly given one of 3 options. 4 power boxes scattered around the area, much like how you unlock the courtroom in Houston Breakout to reactivate the pin pad, the classic thermal lance to just break open the front door, or the new plasma cutter for quite literally cutting open a hole in the side to access it super easily. Though, do beware of this because when you're inside, you suddenly can't hear anything outside the vault once you've entered it after opening it with the plasma cutter. The next place that you can go to instead, and the place depending on your RNG you could access instead of Corvo, is Moo You, the Payday equivalent to a Build-A-Bear workshop, smuggling meth inside of the plushies. Though, if you bring the favor for it, you can just have all 3 stores available. Anyway, stealth-wise, getting in here has 2 options that I could get. There's the vents that require you to mask up to go through, or the back door that requires flipping about 3 colored switches to open the door to the front area of the Moo You store. Once you grab the QR code from the employee inside, you can go into the back room where you're either looking for an SSD with the code for the shutters, or a fingerprint for the fingerprint scanner to open the shutters instead. If you don't get the fingerprint scanner RNG, you'll also have to look at this whiteboard to see which specific plushies are being used to smuggle the meth. Otherwise, you'll just find out by hacking the PC in the front. Getting in when you're going loud isn't too dissimilar to Corvo though, as more often than not I've only ever gotten the 4 power boxes or the new at the time router hack to speed up a bar. Partly because the act of getting into the store center is still the same and can be challenging to do when you're being hounded by swaths of SWAT. The last area you can get loot to steal from is the Nobleman Lounge, basically acting as the main bar area of the mall, or in other words, just an extra fancy food court. Just like the previous 2 storefronts, you can sneak in here through the vents, which requires masking up, scan the Dirty Ice store manager against the door to unlock it, or use the new mechanic of hacking routers to open the door faster. Complain about the heist all you want, but it's got plenty of RNG to keep things from getting stale. Getting into the storage of the lounge and Loud isn't that complicated though, since you only need a drill or thermite to get in. However, the variety in Loud shows up in multiple ways once you're through the door, one of which being the fact that the loot could either be in the boxes you see on the shelves, or one of the coolers even further back. You'll still want to get into the side room with the computer telling you what's where regardless though, as going back for stealth for a moment, if the cocaine stored here is in one of the coolers, you have to get a QR code from the manager inside the kitchen to open the correct one and bag all the loot, or if you're going Loud, use thermite on the lock. Of course, there's also just the option of being able to open any of the coolers with a button in the side office too, with the punishment for not waiting for the PC to tell you which one the loot's in being a lengthy cooldown period. If it's just in the boxes on the shelves though, the PC will tell you which specific boxes the drugs are in for you to steal easily. And thankfully, unlike at launch, you can also just shoot open the boxes instead of having to hold F on every single one of them, though you can still do that if you want to save ammo. Once you've gotten the loot you're after though, securing it isn't too complicated, at least until you see just how far you have to go to secure it, especially if you're playing stealth where the excuse is to throw it down the basement with a chute. But come on, you're telling me a mall of this size only has a singular garbage chute right in front of the owner's office? At least put one next to the lounge, you know that there's plenty of trash that comes from there. Plus it makes the potential tedium a lot more bearable. Depending on where you started, you're either securing all the bags in a loot cage like in multiple previous heists, or you're stealing Pietro's show car in the front of the mall, which none of the heists is going to fit in and drive away realistically. Video game logic at its finest here. Regardless of which one you get though, it's not going to negate the sheer amount of forward and back, and then forward and back, and then go forward and back, then put 1 foot forward. You'll need to engage in to secure everything, and that's without even talking about the extra loot that you can activate with favors. The first of the 2 extra loot favors is the favor that adds in a special golden Teddy Moo plush, which apparently nobody in the gang is tall enough to reach, so you need to grab a ladder from one of the storage rooms and grab it that way, meaning that if you combine the favors right, you can have a total of 37 separate bags to loot. Probably the most a single Payday heist has ever had, though I could be wrong on that. Remember how I mentioned the idea for the shopping cart came from this heist back in my First World Bank video? This bag total right here is why. If that's not going to be a thing, there needs to be a much better way to move the bags. Like, I don't know, a guaranteed zip line in the side office so that you can have one that goes between the Nobleman Lounge and the main front hall. The fourth and final favor for this heist is stealing Pietro, which is actually pretty self-explanatory. You're stealing Pietro from the mall and selling him back to the Palatucci's, and I find this funny purely because he's only worth about 1.5 golden moos if you go by the loot secure pop-ups. Pietro only shows up in the Nobleman Lounge, quite literally getting high off his own supply, where you can grab him at any time, though I don't think anyone would rightfully try and take him away in stealth without the guards patrol in this heist, so you're more likely kidnapping him once the alarm goes off. Though if you don't grab him in stealth, you'll have to overheat the cooler he's hiding in to get him out in the open, and thankfully, he's also bulletproof, so you can literally just yell at him to follow you to the getaway and not have to worry about it unless he stops on the way. Why this is locked behind a favor, I have no idea. But I do have ideas on how to fix this. Something I brought up and somewhat brushed over while going through how you rob each of the stores is that you can only access the objective store in Loud. First things first, this should be changed so you can loot anything from any of the stores in any order by default, which means the favor for that would need to be replaced, and I'd simply make that a favor for being able to walk around the private area sections of the mall as you please, functionally replacing it with a fake VIP invitation, which would be accurate in this scenario considering you're sneaking into a mob-run mall. You know, make the guards think you're Pietro's customers. Of course, you're probably wondering what the point of the office would be with that change. Well, that's also simple. The office would tell you which of the stores Pietro is selling wares in, and also which one he's just gone off to check the supply for, meaning he'll be inside the Corvo Gun safe looking over the rifles, for example. The favor for stealing Pietro would still work the same as it does now, making him show up in the more public section of the Nobleman Lounge being too high to care. The way you'd be able to avoid guards much more reliably, and also secure loot much more simply if you're playing this in stealth, would be to pull a classic Boys in Blue, getting a box of donuts and putting them in a public area for guards to go to and face a wall while they stuff their faces, ignoring the Payday gang taking their boss away right behind them. And also ignoring the gang coming back to bag everything Pietro was planning to sell, because, come on, you think they'd leave loot behind? On to the more miscellaneous things I take issue with in the heist, starting with the stores that are locked off, only ever being Moo You or Corvo, since Nobleman Lounge is never once the store you don't have access to, and that annoys me, because initially I thought it was because of needing to get into this side room next to the lounge, assuming it was the only place the security room spawned, but no! That spawns downstairs next to the Moo You too! So why can't Nobleman Lounge be locked off for once? It's not like the shutter placements to keep it locked away aren't already in place, you just be on the opposite end of them for once. Speaking of those shutters, I really feel like locking off half the heist with them is a bit annoying, but at the same time, I don't really know how else you would limit it, aside from just moving where the shutters are so that you can't access any of the entrances to the other shops. The other thing that annoys me with this heist is the sheer size and lack of cover in the environment. The size of the environment I don't think much can be done with, but the lack of cover should be much more easily fixable by just increasing the size of some of the environmental objects. Like this planter behind these benches in front of the Nobleman Lounge. Just make these a bit taller and suddenly you have decent cover. Plus, you could also emphasize that whole rundown mall feeling with folding tables, ramshackle items of construction equipment, and similar objects. Especially for spots that would be good to put a distraction for the guards at if Pietro is going to be a guaranteed thing in the heist. Overall, I do want to say that Shopping Spree is one of my favorite heists in the game, and my favorite of Year 2, if for nothing else, the premise alone. But being a Year 2 heist, it doesn't exactly hit its mark on what could make it absolutely great either, being more about putting forward ideas and seeing how they can be expanded upon later than much else. In this heist's defense though, after recording an extremely large amount of footage for both this and Delivery Charge, I'll admit, the boring repetition of that heist made me want to despise it by the time I'd made that video, and I played Delivery Charge about 10 times. I got tired of it at about the third or fourth run. I played Shopping Spree probably even more than that, and because of the sheer variety and the moment-to-moment of it, I was never bored. I got frustrated, sure, but I didn't reach a point with this heist where I just felt like I wanted to move on to something else. Shopping Spree is fun, but as is standard for Payday 3 at this point, it could definitely do with some improvement. With all that out of the way, that's also going to be the end of this series for the time being, until Starbreeze releases another new heist in the future, which probably won't be for another 3 months at the earliest, seeing as we already know the roadmap for this quarter, being 3 heist reworks, theoretically on the same level as the rework of No Rest for the Wicked, which I'm certainly looking forward to. As for what I'm going to be doing from here on in terms of content, I'm probably going to be stepping back from Payday for a bit. I'll still make videos on updates and other ideas on what could be done to improve the game, but there's more than just Payday that I want to make videos about, probably starting with one focusing on Resident Evil 9 But until next time, thank you all for watching, and I hope you take care.